President Biden has green-lighted a response to the deadly drone attacks by the Iranian-backed militia. And the defense secretary is vowing forceful action, at the same time apologizing for his secret hospitalization. Joining us now live is NTD's White House correspondent Iris Tao. Good evening, Iris. So what is Secretary Lloyd Austin saying today?
Good evening to you, Steve. So amid public backlash over his lack of transparency, Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin today is apologizing for not telling the American public and to his boss, President Biden, about his surgery for his prostate cancer for days. Here's what he explained for why he didn't make it public in the beginning. Watch.
My first instinct was to keep it private. I never liked burdening others with my problems. I've apologized directly to President Biden, and I've told him that I'm deeply sorry for not letting him know immediately.
Austin's hospitalization sparked public backlash partially because it came at a time when he called also a very dangerous moment in the Middle East. And the White House said today that President Biden has made his choices and his decision about how to respond to a Sunday drone attack in Jordan that killed 3 American service members. Meanwhile, Secretary Austin today is saying that there will be a multi-tiered response and saying this. Watch.
No, I don't think the adversaries are of a one-and-done mindset, and so they have a lot of capability. I have a lot more.
And Austin also saying today that the U.S. will have a much larger capacity than what it's facing, also adding that the U.S. does not want to get into a war with Iran, which is backing the militia group that carried out the attack. Steve.
And Iris, today President Biden issuing new sanctions targeting Israeli settlers in the West Bank. Tell us about these.
So President Biden today issued a new executive order targeting 4 Israeli settlers in the West Bank who have been accused of attacking Palestinians in that occupied territory. While President Biden argues that these attacks have affected the viability of a 2-state solution, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu quickly criticized President Biden's actions today in saying that the vast majority of Israeli settlers in the West Bank are law-abiding citizens. And meanwhile, President Biden is campaigning today in a place in Michigan where there is the largest American Arab population, also the largest Muslim American population in the country. And we know that this group is growing increasingly critical of President Biden's handling of the war in Gaza, and they could be critical in the upcoming 2024 presidential election. Steve.
NTD's Iris Tao reporting live from the White House. Thank you, Iris. In just hours from now, we could see details of the Senate's bipartisan border deal. This as House Republicans intensify their resistance. NTD's Melina Wisecup is on Capitol Hill with the latest developments.
After months of negotiations in the Senate, a highly contested border bill will soon be released. Senate Leader Chuck Schumer saying they plan to post the full text of the bill as early as tomorrow and no later than Sunday.
These challenges at the border and in Ukraine and the Middle East are just too great.
The leader is pushing for a vote by next week. But with growing opposition to the deal, it's unclear how much Republican support it will get.
You're asking me a question I can't answer right now, which is what is the fate of it?
House Republicans stand in strong opposition to it, pointing to rumors that it would allow for thousands of illegal crossings.
They want to allow 1.8 million individuals to still come into the country. You're legalizing the illegal activity that's taking place.
Is that it allows for 5,000 entrants per day. That's a non-starter. I don't even know why the Senate thinks that's a starter.
Supporters, meanwhile, have tried to debunk this claim.
So it's never been about codifying 1.8 million. That's patently untrue. It will be proven untrue in the text.
Even if it can pass the Democrat-controlled Senate, its fate is grim in the House. Speaker Mike Johnson saying bluntly it has no chance of getting a vote. Democrat Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries leaving the door open to taking matters into their own hands.
Would you consider trying to get around Speaker Johnson if he doesn't bring it up to the floor?
We have to evaluate the substance of the legislation before we decide the best procedural course of action.
Now, the broader question here is if they aren't able to get this border security deal to President Biden's desk, how will Congress move forward with aid to Israel, Ukraine, and Taiwan? Reporting from Capitol Hill, Melina Wisecup, NTD News.
As lawmakers keep working on a border deal, New York City and Boston today are dealing with the effects of illegal immigration. The New York governor is now saying authorities should deport the suspects who have been identified in a recent attack against police officers in that city. NTD's Arian Pazdar has more.
A group of people believed to be illegal immigrants recently attacked 2 police officers near Times Square. The young men punched and kicked the officers in their heads while they were lying on the ground. Manhattan's district attorney's office confirmed to NTD that the suspects have been released without bail. And New York Governor Kathy Hochul now says that officials should consider deporting the suspects. Democratic Councilman Robert Holden tells NTD he agrees with the governor.
You kick an officer in the face several times and punch an officer who's doing their jobs. You should not have the right to walk the streets of New York City or America, for that matter, at all. I don't know why we're called a sanctuary city, because we want to protect criminals. No, that's not what we're supposed to be doing.
Meanwhile, in Boston, a recreational center in a predominantly black and brown neighborhood was transformed into a shelter for immigrants overnight. Boston Democratic City Councilor Erin Murphy recalls what locals say about the decision.
Why are other people getting things when we need them here in our city?
Boston is a sanctuary city. Massachusetts is the only state in the country with a right to shelter law, meaning it has to provide housing to anyone who needs it. Murphy tells NTD it might be time to take a closer look at those laws.
It doesn't make you a bad person because you're questioning how much can the state take, how much can our city handle before we have to really shut down and take a good look at what are those effects. And if they're negative effects, we have to decide, is that something we want to continue to do?
The governor of Massachusetts said she is looking at alternative sites to house the immigrants, but that there are none available at the moment. Arian Pastar, NTD News.
Illegal immigration and the economy are 2 major issues weighing on the minds of voters of all races. The influx of illegal immigrants is having a particular impact on minority communities. We spoke with Geron Smith, former deputy assistant to President Trump on domestic policy, about how these forgotten communities are suffering. Geron Smith, thank you so much for joining.
Thanks for having me.
Illegal immigration, it's obviously a huge issue in all of our major cities right now, not just along the southern border. Most recently in the city of Boston, right in the heart of Roxbury, you have the Reggie Lewis Recreation Center, and that was a center that was built for the black community there, and it's now being taken over by the government, the local government, to house illegal immigrants. The people of Roxbury aren't too pleased. What do you make of this?
Well, I would be upset, especially being a part of a community. You build something to help your children and help make a difference for your community, only for that to be intercepted by individuals who are essentially jumping the line and taking benefits and resources from people who need it. The issue with the border, it's more than just the public safety piece. It's capacity to really help people. America hasn't done a good job of creating infrastructure for opportunity for its Americans. And so to expand those capabilities to Americans who aren't citizens, we're just not at that place right now, especially post-pandemic. And so I follow the America First agenda, which is putting the American people first, especially forgotten communities like the one that you mentioned in Boston. We need to make sure that they have first access, but also opportunity. And having a centerpiece being taken over by people who are only here because of lack of government putting the right resources in place to prevent so many illegal immigrants from coming into the country.
Geron, if you could, talk to us about the America First agenda and what it actually did for those forgotten communities that you mentioned.
We had President Trump usher in an agenda that wanted to roll back some of those policies that made America less competitive. And instead of other countries being able to benefit from different trade deals, he wanted to create trade deals that helped the common American, that created jobs here, that brought back the whole concept about American-made goods and being able to have our goods be, bar none, or the top in the world. And we do that by putting the right policy regime that incentivizes investment here in the United States. That also is looking at some of those communities that have been decimated because of those loss of jobs. If you look at what they call the Rust Belt in the Midwest, many of them were affected by bad trade policy, as you saw steal jobs and go overseas, or if you're looking in the South and you're seeing their lack of manufacturing, all because we had bad trade policies that didn't benefit America.
Right now, you're seeing in the polls, former President Trump is gaining with Black Americans in the polling. There's also the issue of enthusiasm. So you might have Trump up in the polls, but the ones that voted for Biden or may vote for Biden, they also have to be enthusiastic to come out. What do you think are going to be some of these issues that determine 2024?
Well, I think that more than ever, the issue around immigration has become a big issue for communities of color, because as you mentioned, in places like Chicago or Boston and New York, you're seeing a huge influx of illegal immigrants. At a time where you have growing prices, you have lack of opportunity, you have other groups of people who are competing for those same opportunities, and that also creates other issues such as, cost of getting a job, how much they may pay you. And so I think the immigration issue is going to be extremely important, but also the feel of the economy. You hear the Biden administration talk about how their policy is working, but most everyday Americans aren't feeling it. They're not feeling it at the gas pump. They're certainly not feeling it at the grocery store, and certainly with the cost of rent.
Geron Smith, really appreciate you joining us.
Thanks so much.
Thank you for watching the Capitol Report. If you want to see our full broadcast, check us out at epochtv.com.